The wind blows hard in December, and so does Nintendo for not announcing the Switch 2 editions of Xenoblade. Are you serious, Nintendo? Get your pricing discourse and your physical copy discourses out of the way. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is Xenoblade in 60 frames per second, 1080p at minimum. Just like Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, the game that has riled up many fans, whether they're a die-hard X fan from the Wii U, or they're a newer fan. It's just a game that's got the community talking in so many ways, but I love the fact that we're all just in this time period where we're not only are we enjoying a new Xenoblade release, but we're on the precipice of a new console, we're on a precipice of presumably a new Xenoblade game. There's just so much to look forward to, and that's why I'm here right now. It's 2:30 a.m. Eastern right now. I'm not gonna edit this video. I'm just gonna yap away. No bullet points, no prior plans of who I am in this current moment. Except for one thing. Actually, there's one thing I wanted to make sure to mention. And it's way overdue. So I posted my reaction over a month ago at this point, I believe. I was very awe-inspired by that ending. But I did get one thing wrong. One thing very, very wrong. That girl is probably Al's sister. I understand this now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did not know at that time because I forgot that like she was supposed to be around Lynn's age, and it kind of makes sense too because he said he saw like the afterlife a little bit. I thought it was like some sort of angel, which I guess is technically true, but I apologize for not knowing. But what I don't apologize for is wanting those Switch 2 editions. I brought that up for a reason. Because that's a good place to start. Where do we go from here, right? I think starting out with Zelda makes sense. Then next time you have like a Nintendo Direct with like a little blurb of Switch 2 editions, you can easily put Xenoblade in there as another showpiece, right? You know, you lead with Zelda, and then next time, oh, you thought there wouldn't be like a big upgrade? Well, bam, we got Xenoblade. But that does bring the question of Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition. I still think that's gonna happen. At this point, you know, my doubts of it happening in 2027, 10 years afterwards, I am starting to now believe in that theory, especially after Xenoblade X. But some might say it was already unwarranted because the Switch is backwards compatible, but especially now after those upgrades and the Switch 2 editions, that it would be unwarranted. Like, just have a Xenoblade 2 Switch 2 edition. And I'm of two minds of that. I could see them doing something like Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby, where not only was that an upgrade, but it also got another like substantial bit of content, right? I could see that for Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition, because we're talking about spoilers. This is a spoiler welcome safe space, okay? There's a lot of purple going on. There's a lot of purple. There was already a lot of purple with Xenoblade 3. There's even more purple with Xenoblade X. The purple man has to show up again. Malos in some way, shape, or form has to be relevant. I do also have to acknowledge that I'm not quite buying into this whole theory about the conduit being purple, meaning that there's multiple conduits. I think it's likely, but I don't think it's like a fact. Basically, I think the conduit itself could change colors based on whatever circumstance it's currently in. Right? We saw it a certain color in Xenoblade 2, but that's because it was being used for a specific purpose in the World Tree. That was very different from what they're doing with the Sumerians. I suppose since we have all these universes, it would make sense that there would be another version of the conduit, just like there's different versions of Earth. But even then, I don't know, I just feel like the conduit, it makes more sense thematically for it to be this one mysterious thing, the one thing that's really tying all these universes together, the one power that's just causing them all to go crazy. I think, I don't know, for me personally, I think that would be a more appealing story to tell. Speaking of the multiverse though, I didn't even think about it this way, but while I was watching some first time playthroughs, I saw these comments being brought up, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a great way to put it. It reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy XIV. How that narrative had all these different stars, as they called them, these different reflections, and they would be destroyed, like they were just doomed, and then you would actually visit some of them, save them from their apocalypse. Well, some of them already suffered, but, you know, you're kind of helping them back on their feet. I feel like that's very similar to what's happening with the multiverse, and with the ghosts in particular. I don't want to spoil Final Fantasy XIV, of course, but for anybody who has played that, there's a lot of parallels there. And I would be so down if they went that direction. I mean, they're already going that way, but if it kind of just comes more into fruition, where it's not just about one world anymore, it's about just something greater in each game. Because each game still is tied to one world, but I guess I've always thought that, how do they make Xenoblade bigger? How do they keep pushing the boundaries? Well, actually push those boundaries. Like, let's have some space travel. Because Xenoblade is a series that starts off as fantasy, but just progressively gets more sci-fi throughout the game. And I'm fine if it stays that way. I'm not saying that this is the way that they should go, but I think it would just be so poetic. It would just make so much sense for the series to keep pushing that sci-fi, keep getting more sci-fi as we go. Like, the worlds themselves could be fantasy, but, you know, having that sci-fi elements of space travel. That's the theory I've had at the ending of the original Xenoblade 3, before Future Redeems. I thought it'd be cool if there's a game where you would have Noah in one planet, Mio on the other, and then you eventually find your way to travel to each other. But, of course, it seems like they just merged. So right now, we're still on one planet. But don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. I'm just saying, don't be surprised if we do get more intergalactic interactions, if you will. And that actually segues into one of my dream games. When I say dream game, I don't just mean like, oh, they should make a sequel to this game. Not that kind of dream game. I mean a dream game as in, like, this is not gonna happen. This is like 95% chance minimum not gonna happen. And that's for various reasons, which I will soon explain. But let me pitch you my dream game. Many of you will be repulsed by the idea, but I think some of you will be like, oh, okay, why not? And that is Xenoblade, the actual, real MMO. I've already been talking about Final Fantasy XIV and how you go to the different reflections, and that sets up the different expansions. With the way that Xenoblade X ends, if they do end up on the planet at the end of Future Redeemed, I feel like that's just the perfect setup for an MMO, where you have these 4 different factions, you know, from all the different games. And maybe you can, like, start where you want to start. Doesn't have to be an MMO to achieve this, but I'm just picturing it that way. Just like Final Fantasy XIV, you pick where you want to start, right? You pick what race you want to be, and then you just have this story. Because if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, if the idea of an MMO scares you off for some reason, Final Fantasy XIV is the quintessential MMO narrative experience. Like, you could play that game single player and be fine. Like, obviously there's those battles and those raids where you have to get different players, but you can pretty much treat it as a single player experience and you're fine. So yeah, don't just shrug this off because you want a single player game. I think if you have not played Final Fantasy XIV, then you're just not aware of how well you can craft a single player experience in an MMO setting. Now, that being said, you could not want an MMO because you have to subscribe to it and all these other little different monetizations. I get that part. I am totally with you in that respect. But again, I'm just saying, this is a dream game. I'm not saying it'd be perfect. I'm not saying it'd be great for reality. I'm just saying that it'd be pretty cool to have Final Fantasy XIV, but be Xenoblade. That, to me, I'm sorry, Final Fantasy XIV fans, but I could not help but think of that the whole time I was playing Final Fantasy XIV. I have to admit it. I have to admit, as much as I enjoyed Final Fantasy XIV, I just constantly thought to myself, yo, but if this was Xenoblade, if this was Xenoblade though, it'd be like so much cooler for me. For me personally, it would. And not just be a good way, because everyone talks about Xenoblade Warriors, which would take less work. It wouldn't have all those subscriptions and stuff. I get the advantages of Xenoblade Warriors. But I would just rather have a proper sequel where those worlds, or rather those nations, whatever you want to call them, that's where they interact in a full-on sequel, or I would have something like an MMO. To me, that just makes a lot of sense. The biggest problem, though, is that Nintendo Online isn't good. And maybe that'll change with the Switch too, because there has been some strides recently. F-099, I think, is a great example, where that game, it's 99 players, it works pretty much seamlessly. You would not expect that from a Nintendo game, but it works like a charm. Now obviously that's very different from an MMO, but there was also that playtest, which apparently I can't talk about because NDAs and all that. But that was also experimenting with more MMO-esque features, more massive multiplayer features. So I'm just saying that it could happen. I don't think it'd be out of the question for this next generation to have more online games of this nature. I'm not saying it has to be the Xenoblade MMO. I'm not saying it has to be an MMO in general, but just to have that kind of shared experience. I feel like there's going to be more of that with the Switch 2 in general. Gosh, I think that'd be so cool, but I know there's a lot of you listening who just hate that idea. I know, I understand, I get it, but I think that'd be so cool as someone who loves Final Fantasy XIV, but loves Xenoblade even more. If there was any time for that to happen, it would be right now, right? If it ever happened in history, this is a time where you do it. And another reason why I think it works is because if this planet really is the combination of all the Xenoblade games, that means that, at least most likely, we would be revisiting old areas again. I don't think that would work as well for a sequel. Now, this is a huge assumption. It does not have to be based on similar areas or the same exact areas, right? I'm not saying it has to be backtracking. I'm not even saying it has to be like Xenoblade 3, where it's a mishmash. But that's just kind of the assumption that I had. If it is a literal merge of the world, I would expect there to be similar areas. And in that case, I think that would work better in an MMO. Because with a full game, a full single-player game, we've already had that with Xenoblade 3. I just feel like whatever the sequel is, it's going to be predominantly new areas. And it would make a lot of sense as to why the Xenoblade X epilogue only had Volitaris, right? It didn't have any sort of new, true continent on Mira. It would make a lot of sense if they were just saving their ideas for whatever the new sequel is. Or if we do actually have the space travel, we could just get the best of both worlds. Literally. You have that one world that's very familiar, but then you interact with other worlds, and that's where you get the new settings. I'm just saying, it would make a lot of sense. I've been predicting this since Xenoblade 3, the base game. And yes, sure, a lot of my predictions have notoriously been incorrect. It seems like ever since I correctly predicted Pyra and Mythra being in Smash Brothers, it's just all gone downhill. I've just been taking L's left and right. I was wrong about Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition coming sooner. I was wrong about Xenoblade X Definitive Edition existing. It's just all wrong. I've been taking a lot of L's in the prediction department, okay? So when I talk about all these things, if you're excited about it, I'm sorry, because I'm saying it, it's not gonna happen. However, I should also mention the possibility that the world of Xenoblade X, at the end, is not shared with Xenoblade. Now that could mean that you go from that world, and then you visit the Future Redeemed world. It could be that. Or they could just be their own separate things for now. And I think that's fine. But I also want to emphasize Elma and Lyn. Especially Elma. Some people say that Elma feels like she got shafted, like she's being overshadowed by Al. But I don't agree. Because if you look at the base game, that was pretty much Lyn and Lao's story. We say that Elma's the real main character of Xenoblade X, but it's not really true. She's the leader, but the actual story being told in the base game is between Lyn and Lao, right? That's That's the bulk of the conflict in that game. And then in the epilogue, the chapter 13, that's where you have Al, right? So for me, I think this is just, okay, let's tell their stories in this game, but Elma's gonna be the continuous, like, thread, the main centerpiece through all of this. It's kind of like, for example, Pyra and Mythra in Xenoblade 2, where both in the base game and Torna, they're not the true main character. I mean, they are when you look at the narrative as a whole, right? But when you look at them individually, it's not truly about them. But like I said, as a whole, that's where things get different. That's where I feel like Elma's gonna fit in. At the very least, I could see her having a greater role in whatever the follow-up is. But either way, even if that doesn't necessarily happen, I think she's supposed to be the backbone of the whole narrative. Especially since she has the greatest history with the ghosts. I firmly believe the ghosts are coming back. I think it'd be really weird. It would be weirder than what they did in the base game, where they showed up at the beginning, then they were never talked about again. Now that they have this major presence, they have to show back up, which means Elma has to be important. So I wouldn't really worry in that respect. I think it was way better for them to just focus on Al and the Ares, because they're so, you know, they're so integral to how they push forward. But now that we're actually here, now that we've established that the ghosts are a primary antagonist, I think that's where Elma is going to start to shine a lot more. I think the last thing I want to address, very briefly because I'm ignorant, is Xenosaga. I have not played Xenosaga because I am coping for those HD remasters any day now, surely. But from what I've heard from personal friends and just comments online, is that a lot of what they did in Chapter 13 is similar to Xenosaga, the collective consciousness, as we refer it to. And to me, what does that mean? Does that mean that Xenosaga is going to be connected? Or does that mean, okay, well, we can't connect it, so instead we're going to, like, borrow some elements? I mean, the Xeno games are always referencing each other, but in terms of like a direct connection, right? The good thing about the multiverse is that they don't necessarily have to decide that now. Like, they could leave these crumbs on the table, right? They could leave these potential connections, but if they end up not being able to do it because of, I don't know, copyright or whatever, then that's okay. I don't think we'd ever get Xenogears, unfortunately, but whether or not Xenosaga happens, I just think it's cool that those fans get to get something out of it, you know? Feel acknowledged, feel seen. Oh, you know what? I guess I should end this video by giving a timeline of how things are gonna shape out for Xenoblade. Like, when do I predict that we're gonna see the next Xenoblade, and when is it gonna come out? I'm sorry in advance for making a prediction that will probably go terribly wrong. The way that Chapter 13 was written, it feels like we're almost there. It doesn't feel like, okay, yep, see ya, we're waving goodbye for a while. No, it feels like this is the next step. We're about to be there. It just seems like something they want you to be excited about. So to me, that says, yeah, next year. To me, next year is going to be the new Xenoblade game. That would make a lot of sense with the timelines of other Nintendo games. I definitely don't think Xenoblade would come out this holiday season, not just because of Xenoblade X, but because they have Metroid already, they have Pokemon, they're probably going to have one other new game as well, maybe in a future Nintendo Direct, let's say the summer. But I don't think Xenoblade would beat that. It could, but I don't think so, regardless of whether or not Xenoblade X happened this year. I know people keep bringing up the new medieval fantasy IP from Monolith Soft, and can I just say, I might have already said this in a prior video, I'm so sorry if I have, but I just think it's so funny that those people are begging for something new from Monolith Soft, but they're begging for a medieval fantasy RPG. Just think about that for a second. Wow, that's very fresh. That's so new. It's not like we don't have enough of those already. But I don't think that's gonna happen. At least next year. I think the first new game that they're gonna make for Switch 2 is indeed the next Xenoblade game. And I think whether it is that summer direct or that fall direct, I think Xenoblade's gonna be there. I think we will see a tease at the very least of the new Xenoblade game this year. I really don't think this year passes by without seeing Xenoblade again. And I don't just mean those Switch 2 editions, because that should be a given, okay? I'm talking about a whole new Xenoblade. It's just my gut feeling, which has been wrong many times. I feel like we're gonna see it, because they have to show, like, you know, long-term games as well. Nintendo likes to show games that are in the near future, and that's great. I think that's ideal. But you also have to have those games that show you, hey, you don't just want this console right now. It's not just relevant right now. It's going to be relevant in the future. You're not going to have to worry about having great games to play in the future. I think Xenoblade could be that sort of anchor, right? Especially since we all expect the new Xenoblade to be a showpiece, both graphically and both just the content and the size of the world and all that. I think that's a good sort of like dangling carrot to say, hey, you know what? For all the new Switch owners, or if you're buying it this holiday, check out this other huge sick-ass game that's coming up in 2026. I think that'd be pretty cool. And honestly, one of the things that shocked me about the Switch 2 Direct is the lack of JRPGs, relatively, right? I know we got Bravely Default coming out at launch, and that's cool and all, but also Raito. Did not forget about you, Raito. In terms of new JRPGs, there wasn't much. I can't even think of one. I'm sorry if there's an obvious example, but I can't think of a whole new JRPG for the Switch 2. And to me, that's really weird, because the Switch has a reputation for JRPGs. Every Nintendo Direct for the Switch 1 has so many JRPGs. So to me, that's a huge omission. And of course, they have Xenoblade and Fire Emblem as their two sort of like anime-styled games for that audience. Fire Emblem wasn't there either. So maybe the next Direct or whatever, that will be Fire Emblem's time, and then Xenoblade fans will have to wait. But I don't necessarily think they have to be mutually exclusive. So yeah, I just feel something. I feel something coming. A storm is brewing. If you're not sold by the Switch 2, or if you're waiting for Xenoblade, whatever the case is, I don't think you're gonna have to wait long. So mark my words, next year, when the tariffs have caused Switch 2 to be $800, that is when Xenoblade will reappear, rise like a phoenix from the ashes. I'm betting absolutely nothing except my sheer emotion. You can look forward to this beautiful future, this optimistic and hopeful future. I'm gonna feel stupid if I missed anything obvious I should have talked about, but this was sincerely a late night ramble. So I hope you could bear with how scuffed and weird and random it was. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And have a great start to the month of May. We are very close to the new generation. Bye-bye.